The Story of King Arthur and His Knights by Howard Pyle. Chapter 3rd. How several kings and high dukes essayed to draw the sword out of the anvil, and how they failed. Likewise, how Arthur made the essay and succeeded therein. So, when the morning of Christmas Day had come, many thousands of folk of all qualities, both gentle and simple, gathered together in front of the cathedral for to behold the essay of that sword. Now there had been a canopy of embroidered cloth of divers colours spread about the sword and the anvil, and a platform that had been built around about the cube of marble stone. And nigh unto that place there had been a throne for the archbishop established, for the archbishop was to overlook that essay, and to see that every circumstance was fulfilled with due equity and circumspection. So when the morning was half gone by, the archbishop himself came with great pomp of state, and took his seat upon the high throne that had been placed for him. And all his court of clerks and knights gathered about him, so that he presented a very proud and excellent appearance of courtliness. Now unto that assay there had been gathered 19 kings and 16 dukes, and each of these was of such noble and exalted estate that he had entertained high hopes that he would that day be approved before the world to be the right king and overlord of all Britain. Wherefore, after the archbishop had established himself upon his throne, there came several of these, and made demands that he should straightway put that matter to the test. So the archbishop commanded his herald for to sound a trumpet, and to bid all who had that right to make assay of the sword to come unto that adventure. And the herald did according as the archbishop ordered. And when the herald had sounded his trumpet, there immediately appeared the first of those kings to make trial of the sword. And he who came was King Lot of Orkney in the Isles. With King Lot there came 11 knights and 5 esquires, so that he appeared in the very noble estate before the eyes of all. And when King Lot had arrived at that place, he mounted the platform. And first he saluted the archbishop, and then he laid his hands to the pommel of the sword in the sight of all. And he bent his body and drew upon the sword with great strength. But he could not move the blade in the anvil even so much as the breadth of a hair, for it stood as fast as the iron in which it was planted. And after that first assay he tried 3 times more. But he was altogether unable to move the blade in the iron. Then after that he thus 4 times made assay. He ceased his endeavour and came down from that place. And he was filled with great anger and indignation that he had not succeeded in his endeavour. And after King Lot there came his brother-in-law King Merlin of Gore, and he also made assay in the same wise as King Lot had done. But neither did he succeed any better than that other king. And after King Merlin there came King Fionn of Scotland, and after King Fionn there came King Mark of Cornwall, and after King Mark there came King Rents of North Wales, and after King Rents there came King Leodegrance of Camelot, and after him came all those other kings and dukes before enumerated. And not one of all these was able to move the blade. And some of these high and mighty lords were filled with anger and indignation that they had not succeeded, and others were ashamed that they had failed in that undertaking before the eyes of those who looked upon them. But whether they were angry or whether they were ashamed, it in no wise helped their case. Now, when all the kings and dukes thus had failed in that adventure, the people who were there were very much astonished, and they said to one another, "How is this? If all these kings and dukes of the very exalted estates had failed to achieve this adventure, then who then may hope to succeed? For here have been all those who are most worthy of that high honor, and all have tried to draw that sword and all have failed. Who then is there now to come after all these who may hope to succeed?" And likewise those kings and dukes spoke together in the same manner. And by there came 6 of the most worthy, to wit, King Lot, King Merlin, King Pellinore, King Ban, King Rents, and Duke Clarence of Northumberland. And these stood before the throne of the archbishop, and spake to him in this wise: "Sir, here have all the kings and dukes of this realm striven before you for to draw forth that sword, and lo, not one of all those who had undertaken that thing hath succeeded in his undertaking. What then may we understand but that the enchanter Merlin has set this adventure for to bring shame and discredit upon all of us who are here, and upon you, who are the head of the church in this realm. For who in all the world may hope to draw forth a sword blade out from a bed of solid iron? Behold, it is beyond the power of any man. Is it not the plan to be seen that Merlin hath made a mock of us all? Now therefore, lest all this great congregation should have been called here in vain, we do beseech you of your wisdom that you presently choose the one from among the kings here gathered, who may be best fitted to be overlord of this realm. And when ye shall have chosen him, we will promise to obey him in all things, whatsoever he may ordain. Verily, such a choice as that will be better worthwhile than to spend time in this foolish task of striving to draw forth a sword out of an anvil which no man in all the world may draw forth. Then was the Archbishop much troubled in spirit, for he said to himself, Can it be sooth that Merlin hath deceived me? And hath he made a mock of me, and of all these kings and lordly folk? Surely this cannot be. For Merlin is passing wise, and he would not make a mock of all the realm for the sake of so sorry a jest as this would be. Sits, he hath some intent in this of which we know not, being of less wisdom than he. Wherefore, I will be patient for a while longer. Accordingly, having commuted thus within himself, he spake aloud in this wise to those 7 high lords. Messieurs, he said, I have faith yet that Merlin hath not deceived us. Wherefore, I pray your patience for one little while longer. For if, in the time a man may count 500 twice over, no one cometh forward to perform this task, then I will, at your behest, proceed to choose one from amongst you, and will proclaim him king and overlord of all. For the Archbishop had faith that Merlin was about to immediately declare king before them all. Now we leave these and turn on to Arthur and his father and brother. For Merlin had bidden these 3 to abide in their pavilion until such time as he thought it would fit for them come out thence. And that time being now come, Merlin and Sir Alphas went to the pavilion of Sir Ector, and Merlin said, Arthur, arise and come forth, for now is the hour is come for thee to assay before the whole world that miracle which thou didst of late execute in privacy. So Arthur did as Merlin bade him to, and he came forth from the pavilion with his father and his brother, and lo, he was like one who walked in a dream. So they 5 went down from thence towards the cathedral and on to the place of assay. And when they had come to the congregation there assembled, the people made way for him, greatly marvelling and saying to one another, Who are these with the enchanter Merlin and Sir Alphas, and whence they came? For all the world knew Merlin and Sir Alphas, and they wist that here was something very extraordinary about to happen. And Arthur was clad all in flame-coloured raiment embroidered with threads of silver, so that others of the people said, Sits, that youth is very fair to look upon. Now who may he be? But Merlin said no word to any man, and he brought Arthur through the purse unto that place where the Archbishop sat. And the purse made way for him, so that he was not stayed in his going. And when the Archbishop beheld Merlin come thus with those others, he arose and said, Merlin, who are those whom thou bringest unto us, and what is their business here? And Merlin said, Lord, here is one come to make assay of yonder sword. And the Archbishop said, Which one is he? And Merlin said, This is he. And he laid his hand upon Arthur. Then the Archbishop looked at Arthur, and he beheld that the youth was very comely of face, wherefore his heart went out unto Arthur, and he loved him a very great deal. And the Archbishop said, Merlin, by what right doth this young man come hither? And Merlin made reply, Lord, he come hither by the best right that there is in the world. For he who standeth before thee clad in red is the true son of Uther Pendragon, and of his lawful wife Queen Igraine. Then the Archbishop cried out aloud in great amazement, and those who stood nigh and who heard what Merlin said were so astonished that they wist not what to think. And the Archbishop said, Merlin, what is this thou tellest me? For who, until now, in all the world hath ever heard that Uther Pendragon had a son? Unto this Merlin made a reply, No one hath ever known of such a thing until now, only a very few. For it was in this wise. When the child was born, the spirit of prophecy laid upon me, and I foresaw that Uther Pendragon would die before a very great while. Wherefore, I feared that the enemy of the king would lay violent hands upon the young child for the sake of his inheritance. So, at the king's behest, I and another took the young child from his mother and gave him unto a third, and that man received the kingly child and maintained him ever since as his own son. And as to the truth of these things, there are others here who may attest to the verity of them. For he who was with me when the young child was taken from his mother was Sir Alphys, and he to whom he was entrusted was Sir Ector of Bonemaison. And those two witnesses, who are without any reproach, will vouch to the verity of that which I have asserted, for here they stand before thee to certify unto what I have said. And Sir Alphys and Sir Ector said, All that Merlin has spoken is true, and thereunto we do pledge our most faithful and sacred word of honour. Then the Archbishop said, Who is there may doubt the word of such honourable witnesses? And he looked upon Arthur and smiled upon him. Then Arthur said, May I then have thy leave, Lord, to handle yonder sword? And the Archbishop said, Thou hast my leave, and may the grace of God go with thee to do thy endeavour. Thereupon Arthur went to the cube of marble stone, and he laid his hands upon the haft of the sword that was thrust into the anvil. And he bent his body and drew very strongly, and lo, the sword came forth with great ease and very smoothly. And when he got the sword into his hands, he swung it about his head so that it flashed like lightning. And after he had swung it thus thrice above his head, he set the point thereof against the face of the anvil, and bore it upon very strongly. And behold, the sword slid very smoothly back into the place where it had aforetime stood. And when it was there, midway deep, it stood fast where it was. And thus did Arthur successfully accomplish that marvellous miracle of the sword in the eyes of all the world. Now, when the people who had congregated at that place beheld the miracle before their faces, they lifted their voices all together, and shouted so vehemently, and with so huge a tumult of outcry, that it was as though the whole earth rocked and trembled with the sound of their shouting. And for whiles they so shouted, Arthur took hold of the sword again, and drew it forth and swung it again, and again drove it back into the anvil. And when he had done that, he drew it forth a third time, and did the same thing as before. Thus it was that all those who were there beheld the miracle performed 3 times over. And all the kings and dukes who were there were filled with great amazement. And they wist not what to think or to say when they beheld one who was little more than a boy perform that undertaking in which the best of them had failed. And some of them, seeing the miracle, were willing to acknowledge Arthur because of it, but others would not acknowledge them. These withdrew themselves and stood aloof, and as they stood thus apart, they said among themselves, What is this, and who can accredit such a thing, that a beardless boy should be set before us all, and should be made king and overlord of this great realm for to govern us? Nay, we will have none of him for our king. And others said, Is it not apparent that Merlin and Sir Alphys are thus exalting this unknown boy, so that they may elevate themselves along with him? Thus these discontented kings spake among themselves, and all of them the most bitter were King Lot and King Urien, who were brothers by marriage with Arthur. Now when the Archbishop perceived the discontent of these kings and dukes, he said to them, How now, messieurs? Are ye not satisfied? And they said, We are not satisfied. And the Archbishop said, What would ye have? And they said, We would have another sort of king for Britain than a beardless boy, of whom no one knoweth, and of whose birthright there are only 3 men to attest. And the Archbishop said, What of that? Hath he not performed the miracle that ye yourselves essayed and failed to perform? But these high and mighty lords would not be satisfied, but with angry and averted faces they went away from that place, filled with wrath and indignation. But others of these kings and dukes came and saluted Arthur and paid him court, giving him joy of that which he had achieved. And the chiefest of those who came unto him in friendliness was King Leodegrance of Camelot. And all the multitude acknowledged him and crowded around that place, shouting so that it sounded like to the noise of thunder. Now, all this while, Sir Ector and Sir Kay had stood upon one side, and they were greatly weighed down by sorrow, for it appeared to them that Arthur had, of a sudden, been uplifted so far from their estate that they may never hope to approach him more. For now he was of kingly consequence, and they were but common knights. And after a while, Arthur beheld them where they stood with downcast looks, whereupon he straightway went to them, and took first one and then the other by hand, and kissed each upon the cheek. Thereupon they were again very glad at being thus uplifted unto him. And when Arthur departed from that place, great crowds of people followed after him, so that the streets were altogether filled with the press of people. And the multitude continually gave him loud acclaim as the chosen king of England. And those who were nearest to him sought to touch the hem of his garments. Wherefore the heart of Arthur was exceedingly uplifted with great joy and gladness, so that his soul took wing and flew like a bird into the sky. Thus Arthur achieved the adventure of the sword that day, and entered into his birthright of royalty. Wherefore, may God grant his grace unto you all, that ye too may likewise succeed in your undertakings. For any man may be a king in that life in which he is placed, if so be he may draw forth the sword of success from the iron of circumstance. Wherefore, when your time of assay cometh, I do hope it may be with you as it was with Arthur that day, and that ye too may achieve success with entire satisfaction unto yourself and to your great glory and perfect happiness. Amen.